Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So I thought it would be worthwhile to just talk about my favorite candlestick pattern. It comes up a lot, and it's something that my subscribers have really picked up on, and I think it's really added to their entries. Let's go ahead and get into this agenda. So the favorite one that I'm looking at, and it doesn't sound all that complicated, or it might be something you think, oh, I already know this, but it really depends on where it shows up. And so I want to go through that. I want to give a little bit of detail on it. And we want to look at this looking for this big green bar at a breakout level. We want to look for a big green bar at a trigger bar, which is a totally separate situation. And then we also want to look at it as a climax bar. And so I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by a big greenie, and which is what how I basically refer to it. And then we'll go through the individual symbol requests that came through. Okay, so I've got different time frames up because I am going to refer to different time frames as I go through some examples. I wanted to show different examples this time just to explain what I'm looking for, how it can be used, and maybe the more examples you see, the more it'll make sense to you. So let's just start with the CyberArk Weekly. And so what am I referring to when I say a big greenie? So if you go back, and this is basically the bar in this situation. Actually, both of these are bars that are kind of key in this trading sequence. And if you look at this bar here, and you go back in time, this is essentially the biggest green bar that we've seen. I mean, look, you could go through this entire phase, all of this consolidation pattern, and this is the bar that has it's the widest range bar with the most green on it. Now, what I'm looking for, and one of the things I really love about Stockcharts and what they've done here, is they give you the ability, and let me just show you how you do this. So if you go to, actually, I'll hit this here. You can change the settings on the candlestick. This was something I requested, and I love the fact that we can put the wick color and the outline color different. It just really, to me, it really sets it apart so you can see what's really taking place on each individual bar, where the wick is on both sides. So what we're trying to find are bars where you're closing in the upper end, where the wick is really making up less than 5 to 10% of the bar, right? It's less than that, and then the wick on the bottom is also making up less than 5% of the bar. So we've got this massive amount of green, but it's also a wide range bar. All right. Now I talk a lot about narrow range bars in a lot of the analysis that I do, but wide range becomes incredibly important too. Now, I also add another feature to that. So we got this massive green with small wick, right? So that's massive green, wide range, but we also want to go back in time and say, okay, what is the biggest green bar over, say, the last 6 months, last year? I mean, I can pretty much go, now I'm not saying this isn't an important bar. It's an incredibly important bottoming tail bar. And this is a big red bar here, right? But in terms of looking for a big green bar, this was the one. This was the kickoff move, and it happened to be on the breakout, which is what I want to find. So if I'm looking at this and I have an alert, which I did, as this was crossing this key level, and I can see that we opened up the week and we had this huge amount of green coming to the upside, and as it breaks out, to me, that's just, it validates the breakout level. It tells me that there's something really important developing. It didn't hurt that the volume was good. Obviously, we already had some signs, and I've talked about this in previous lessons about what was going on in the MACD and ADX in this. But when I see this, and I know that I'm looking for a specific level to be taking out, when I see a huge green bar, it validates the signal, and it gives me a lot more confidence that I'm right about what I'm seeing. All right. Now I'm going to just point this out as well. You see, this is actually the biggest green bar on the whole screen, and it comes after an extended run to the upside, and then we get this huge green bar. Well, typically I'm looking to exit near the end of that bar or at the beginning of the next bar, typically as a trading play. If I were playing this as a trade. Now, if I'm playing it as a trending move, I might take some partial profits at this level and then, trail a stop from there. But I know that this is a pretty good exit point from a trading standpoint. We want to be on the lookout for when we get stretched away from the 18 on any time frame. This happens on any time frame, and I'll show you in a minute how it can be in different time frames, right? We get a big monster bar after an extended run. Great spot to be taking some profits. All right, let's go and look at something like HMY. Now, I think this is a little bit different. Now, I'm showing you this. Let me take this off. So look at what's going on this breakout bar. This is, again, monster. So this was actually this was an exhaustion bar after a move, pretty big move, and it was a huge green bar, biggest bar on the page. That was more of like a profit-taking bar, right? But then we go through this long phase consolidation. We form a really nice pattern here, the way it develops, and then we get the monster green breakout. Now, this is on a monthly chart. Now, what I would tell you is that when I see it on the higher time frames, what it does for me is it gives me this backdrop that says, you know what, I can start looking on the smaller time frames over the next, on the next pullback or something like that, because the midpoint of this bar is probably going to be a really strong support level. And if you notice, we pulled back 3 months in a row and held the midpoint of that big green bar. Something you want to be on the lookout for on the higher time frames, and that can help you with entry on the lower time frames. All right, let's look at something like TW. So this is actually where on a weekly chart we got pullbacks. So this is the pattern we look for. I highlight a lot on my for my subscribers. We get strong move, MACD, ADX, both confirming on both of these moves to the upside. And then we get a pullback in both of them. All right. Now we're looking for a trigger, but we're going to go down to the daily chart for the trigger. We'll look at the trigger on both of those bars. This was the trigger bar here, and this was the trigger bar here. I'm not going to go into details as to why those are the trigger bars. Those are the trigger bars, and look at the size of them. They're the biggest green bars leading up to that. So it gives us, again, this level of confidence that says, I'm right about this entry. This is the right entry. I know I'm hitting it at the right spot. That's what I have found over time. All right, let's look at another breakout pattern. It's so blatantly obvious on the weekly because look at how tiny all of these bars are. Now, this was a pretty decent sized bar, but it wasn't a breakout level. All right, let me just show you the breakout level. Right, so we get this breakout here. Now, we had a big red bar that had no downside follow through. You see what I mean? Like, we get a big red bar, you should think that's selling, that we should have downside follow through, and we didn't get any of that. So that's actually a bullish sign. Then we tried to break out the low of that and had no follow through. So we go through this long accumulation phase, but over the last 3 to 6 months, it really got quiet. And then we get our monster green. That's the kickoff move. Now, it really hasn't played out yet, but look at what was leading up to this. We had a very long low ADX condition, and look at the volume confirmation. So this is the type of thing I'm looking for. Yeah, I might be looking for some kind of a pullback now on the daily chart, but this is an igniting bar. This is the start of a move, not the end of one. All right, I want to give one more example here. Let's look at the 1 minute chart just to show you this happens on all time frames. This was the spider intraday on a 1 minute. So we get this move. This was happening around 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon. Look at the violence of the decline. And then here's the biggest bar of the decline after a good run. And I'm telling you, I used to do that when I traded intraday. I used to look for this all the time. I'd look for an extended run and I'd say, give me a big bar and I'm getting out. And so that would be the exit point. Now, it's not necessarily going to get you out at the bottom tick, but it's going to get you out at the right time. And so it's going to have you thinking exit when you get a big bar after an extended run. Now, that's different than what's taking place here. You see how this is a big red bar, but it's igniting. It's the start of a move, not the end of one. All right. And that tells you we probably got more to come. Use these to your advantage, especially when you're looking to enter something and see if they don't show up. All right, let's go ahead and move into the individual symbols now. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. You can go to the services page to find out about my courses as well as my individual package, which has about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video for that package. And then also, if you're interested in just getting started, you might want to just check out the book, which is on the /book, which is a good starting point. Okay, let's start out with the QQQ. I like to do the QQ as well as the IWM on this show because I handle the SPY Friday morning on my YouTube channel. All right, so let's just look. And really, the Qs, I think, the key right now, there's two things I'm really focusing on when I look at this chart that kind of jump off the page. Number one is we've had this extended period of relative performance. That black line is relative to the S&P. And if you notice, it's starting to tick down. Even though this is continuing to move higher, we're actually showing a little bit of weakness here on a relative basis to the S&P. So I think we got to watch this. If this were to deteriorate to the point where we break the 30 and it rolls, I think that would add risk to this area. And it could end up being the situation where maybe the IWM shows relative improvement while this is rolling over. And I think that would be actually a very bullish scenario, because it doesn't necessarily mean this has to go down. And the big cap stocks have to go down a lot, but they're going to show maybe signs where they're consolidating or correcting. And if that were to take place, we could see some outperformance in some of these other areas, which I think would be healthy. Now, one of the things I'm zeroing in on, I've talked about the last few weeks, is we still have a trend on the daily chart, but we're losing momentum on both the indicators. All right. Now, we do have a reverse divergence. This is one of the patterns for my course, this reverse divergence pattern right at the 40. And even though this line closed below the 18, we didn't take out the low of that. So that's how I kind of distinguish between a true break of a moving average. If you close below it, you got to take out the low of the following bar or that bar anytime. And we didn't do that. We held it. And now we're back above. And in fact, we're at a new high. So we start over again. It's going to have to close below again and then take out the low of that to create a break of the 18. All right. Now, one of the things I want you to be on the lookout for, because we're showing so much divergence in place, we could get this to pop one more time. But I would view that more like a climax move rather than the start of some big upward swing. So I think the one thing to key on right now is to sort of watch this channel that is in place right now and see if we sort of break to the upside of the channel. If we do that, we could be going into some kind of a little climax, and you got to be very careful about getting too bullish because this is breaking out again if it plays out that way. All right. So definitely a few things to be watching in the QQQ, because I do believe it's still a leader as long as its relative strength is holding up above its moving average. All right. If we look at the IWM, the relative strength on this is the exact opposite. We're trying to get this to move. Now, if I were to switch this to a daily chart, we can see that on the short term, we've actually shown a little bit of improvement over the last 2 or 3 days, but it's not enough. I want to see it show up on the weekly. The weekly needs to cross above that moving average and have that moving average turn up, the 30-week. So I've got the Qs doing one thing, potentially topping out, and these trying to turn off the low, the IWM. I mean, I think if we can see that, it might feel like, the market's going to pull back a little bit. Maybe it does, but I think it would actually be a healthier environment if it played out that way. So something we got to be on the lookout for. I don't know if it's going to happen. I mean, this chart looks pretty good to me. I think, the fact that we're through 200, the fact that we're starting to show signs of improvement on a weekly momentum, at least in the MACD, hitting a new high. Green DI is in charge, but we want to see this ADX cross above 25 to kind of confirm. And we also want to see that take place on the daily chart, which hasn't happened yet. All right. All right. Let's take a look at this Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, and looks very much like the Bitcoin futures. And so, I mean, the one thing I'll point out to you, like I think, and we talked about this in one of the webinars that I do for my subscribers, like this was the key level right here for me. I mean, we had the turn, we had the pullback, and this wasn't bad, but this was a little bit more confirming coming up through this 20 level. And I believe it was 30,000 on Bitcoin itself. We had ADX kicking in. We had MACD well above the zero line, coming back down and testing again and holding these moving averages with the rising. You see how these were declining through this whole period and now they're rising. So we want to take advantage of pullbacks while they're rising. It has not pulled back since that time. And now, even though we're at a new high, it's really extended. So I would view this now as a hold. Like if I were in it, I would probably have taken some profits and, be trailing a stop or something like that. But this is not something I would have an interest in buying. Even on a daily chart, it's starting to show like maybe it's a little tired. Wouldn't be surprised to see this maybe form a little bit of a sideways consolidation in the near term. Just made too big of a move for my liking at this point. So would not be in any hurry to be buying it at this point. Maybe consider, actually, if you're in it, maybe trimming it a little bit. Okay, let's look at this one. So I got two specific questions on this, which I thought would be good lessons here. All right. And, you can see these big bars showing up different times, right? You keep an eye out for these big bars. Now, look at what the way this played out. The first question was, we get this deep. So one of the patterns out of my course is this RSI signal where the RSI 20, which is in red, holds above the 50 level, and the RSI 5 gets down oversold below 30. So we just did that in this case. And if you notice, we have rising moving averages on the weekly. That's sort of my stipulation. If we're going to look for this pattern, we got to have these rising. Now, I don't necessarily like the big volume decline here, but I notice a lot of times that's sort of the way this plays out. And the only thing I'll tell you is I'd like to see it take out a weekly high. We haven't done that. So this is the high of last week. And right now, this is the high of this week. I probably would want to see, this week close and then take out the high of that. And then I might consider it. And even though this looks like it's rolling over, I think the way it would play out is that we would probably get a rally up towards 350, come back down, still make the higher low, and then move to the upside. Wouldn't be surprised to see it play out that way because the momentum is so strong. So yes is the answer. I still would consider this. No is the answer to your next one. I don't think I want to play this as a short. Well, I put it to you this way. Unless you're going to play it and understand that there's a lot of support down at 300. If you want to do that and play it off the daily. So the question is, do I want to short this as it gets up to 350? I mean, if it triggers and you can do it from a risk reward standpoint and get in and out, I would say 300 would be the absolute most I would be expecting on this because it does look like there's a decent amount of support. And again, we got a lot of strength in the momentum. And if you notice, we don't have a lot of strength in the momentum to the downside here. You see that? So this looks really violent. Let's just look at this for a second. This is really a violent decline. Look at the big red bar. So yeah, we should be expecting downside follow through, and we got that. But on an ADX basis, it did not create a big red, a negative DI spike strong enough to get the ADX going on the downside. So when I see that, I'm kind of thinking the bulls are still in command here. We got strong ADX on the monthly, strong ADX on the weekly. And even if you're trading in short term, I don't really want to fight that big underlying bias. Okay, let's look at Goldman Sachs here. So this is breaking out of this long sideways consolidation pattern. So we got this big, strong move to the upside, and then we go sideways, and we finally catch up to the 18. And really what I put out with my subscribers this week is I said, look, this has got to go here. It's got to happen right here if it's going to work. We need to see this get going. It looks like it's doing it. It's getting through the round number at 400. So I think that's a really good sign. I would definitely consider this. Maybe now, I mean, you could buy the breakout, but maybe look for a little dip a little bit closer to 400 as a potential buying opportunity. The ADX is rising on the weekly, and look at this turn. This is something I'm always looking for in the bigger picture. See the monthly, but look at where this turned right at the zero line with low ADX. I mean, this looks pretty interesting, and the potential here I think is pretty decent. Okay, so 3M I think is early, but we have to respect what's going on. We've got a break of this downtrend line. All right, we could look at that as a break of the downtrend line, and then so that's the 1, and then we form the 2 here, and now we're coming back up. If we get through this, then we have the completed, so that's a 2, and this would be the 3. So that 1, 2, 3 pattern is something we definitely want to look out for. I really like the 2. I like to play the 2 when we're when the longer term trend is up. So if I'm getting a 1, 2, 3 reversal above the higher time frame, but that's not the case here. The monthly is not in an uptrend. Okay, so this is trying to turn this around. So I actually want to see this complete the 1, 2, 3, and then maybe look to buy the first pullback if this is above the 18-month. You see what I mean? So there's improvement across the board. I like the overall pattern, but I think it's still on the early side. I want to see a little bit more confirmation. Okay, so Hershey. So yeah, I do see. So the question was 40 to 18 bounce kind of forming here. You get the 40, another pattern from my course. So we get the move up and then we pull back, and there is signs of improvement, but I think this is really early. It's not the type of thing that would get me all that excited. We've got a declining 40 and a flat 18. It's not really rising yet. And we're below the 18 month. You see what I mean? So I could see this trying to push a little bit higher, but we have some overlying, some resistance overhead, probably somewhere. Let's just look at this level. I mean, you probably have room to about 210. And then I think you start hitting some more resistance. So, something to maybe play as a trade. But I think beyond that, somewhere around 210 to 215, I think is going to be a much bigger problem to get through. Now, when I look at Ford, this is sort of intriguing me. Now, I do prefer the General Motors pattern, frankly, because I think it's stronger. And again, I'm using relative strength for that. I think the relative strength in General Motors relative to Ford, I think, is better. But what's taking place here in the near term is we just crossed above the 18-month. It looks like we're trying to turn around. And during this big decline, so we had a lot of strength based on the buyers. That's the green DI, right? But then during this decline phase, we haven't shown that much strength in the sellers. We have a low ADX condition. I still think the buyers are in command on a longer term basis. So what we need is more strength on this time frame. We need this green DI to actually break out above all of these spikes. You see these little mini pops that we're getting in both DIs? And we need to break out above that convincingly and get price to kind of break out above this little resistance area, especially the most recent one. And I think if we do that, then this is probably on its way to making a pretty decent little trading move. The resistance up in the mid, like 15 or 16, I think is going to be tough to overcome on the first try, but we could certainly make a move up into that area. So I wouldn't be surprised if we go ahead and do that. Let's look at the next request. So Dell has made this dynamic move to the upside. We can really see it on the monthly chart. You see this huge move to the upside. Look at how far away. So the price of the stock is 113. The 18-month is at 60. All right. And then we go and look at the weekly chart. The 18 week is at 87. Price is at 113. I mean, we're stretched on both of those time frames. So I'm less inclined, unless I'm really going to be a trader and play this. And the way I look at it is because there was overrun here, I usually would expect this to come back down, and then I might consider it if it comes back up through here. See what I mean? So we got to let this play out a little bit. I don't usually take the first trade, and this is something I specify in my course about this crossover pattern when you're above the zero line. Something to be on the lookout for. I think we get some kind of a check back pattern, so I wouldn't be all that interested in playing this turn right now, but maybe a week or two down the road, I could consider it if it doesn't get back too much, doesn't break down below the recent lows. Okay, let's look at IQV. I actually think this looks really good. This is a group move. These healthcare providing stocks, there's a lot of stocks in the same area that are showing the very similar pattern. And let me just point out, we'll start with the monthly chart. We've got this nice kind of cupping pattern developing. Look at what MACD is doing right at the zero line. You see how we have this low ADX condition? The sellers are not strong in this, and the buyers look like they're starting to kick in again, especially based on the way the MACD is turning right at zero. And then on a weekly chart, we've taken out this key resistance area, which was a problem here for a while, and now we're trying to get this green DI to break out. It hasn't quite done it yet, but because it's early, notice the volume pattern. The price and the volume are going to come first, and then we're going to start to see the indicators follow. I would be considering this on any kind of weakness. I think you could look at this as a potential buying opportunity. It'll probably show up in the form of some kind of an opposing trend pattern where this comes down to the zero line and maybe the ADX gets low. But so it could take a couple weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, but I would be watching for that. Finally, we'll take a look at Oracle. I mean, I love this pattern. So this was a really attractive setup as this pulled back here right at the zero line with low ADX. You see what I mean? Now this is happening above a rising 18-month. This was a pinch play here. So really attractive. Now the earnings obviously caused the big breakout. I would be looking for some kind of a pullback here. I think if we got any kind of a little weakness, I would consider this. I do think the overall price structure and everything looks pretty good. Thanks for watching the show today. Send those stock requests to stocktalk@stockcharts.com or throw them down in the comment area if you want me to analyze it on the next show. Also, if you have an interest in learning more about ADX, MACD, multiple time frame analysis, that type of thing, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is called Invest Like a Pro. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.